I got with me here Jeremiah Grossman, well-known specialist on web application security, and we're going to talk a little bit about how does the cloud actually influence web application security. So, web application security, really hot topic right now. Yesterday, Verizon breach report, 89% or so of all data records were compromised through SQL injection, so probably through some web application vulnerability.
Yeah.
So why is this thing so hard, Jeremiah?
Why is
web application security so hard? I mean, why can we not get a handle on that?
I guess two problems. One is 200 million websites are built before we knew we had to secure them. And 200 million more are going to be built by another 17 million programmers that have never had formal training in designing websites. So I think we're going to need two strategies for two different problems.
Okay, so it's a hard problem. You're saying it's an infrastructure thing, people are just not getting it?
I think it's a scale thing now. It's not as if we don't know how to build websites that are secure. Yeah, they're going to have bugs here and there, but by and large, they don't have to be riddled with the enormity of the security issues that are in there now. But right now, 200 million websites, if you just calculate in your head real quick, let's say the average site has between 8 and 12 vulns, let's say 10, right? That's, what is that, something like 2 billion vulns in circulation right now. We just don't know where they are yet. So it's going to take a significant amount of effort to actually go hunt those down and fix them one by one. So there's a scale issue on all the backlog stuff. And then given this is CSA, we're going to be deploying applications in the cloud like mad. And do we know what they do? How do we secure them? How do we know who built them? Okay. What happens when the developers vanish? And
so the 10 vulnerabilities per web application. I think there was an FAA audit last year. 70 apps were audited. I think they had something like 800 critical vulnerabilities. So critical being I can do bad things to the data or get all the data out, not just leaking things like that. Then there were many more actually of medium, so it's probably a low figure there.
I remember reading that report. The scary thing to me on that one is the vulnerabilities, as they put in the report, gave access to the tower infrastructure.
Right.
So yeah, those are not sites that you want to have to be hacked.
So I think the other scary thing on that report was they didn't really say exactly what they were doing, but it sounded like they were using a commercially available scanning tool, and that's what found the vulnerability. So it wasn't really that they put lots of pen testers on it that were digging deeper. It sounded like it was kind of the low-hanging fruit that they were analyzing there. So tools, frameworks, can that help us? Or is it all programmers' fault that?
Oh no, tools can help. Yes, finding vulns or preventing vulns. Frameworks will definitely help. Training developers will definitely help. I don't think we are lack of answers for how to solve this problem. It's a lack of incentives, lack of motivation. I get to talk at a whole lot of conferences, mostly security conferences, and I rarely see a developer in the audience. And you have to ask yourself why that is the case. And one really easy answer, and perhaps somebody in here might disagree, a developer learns security, they don't make any more money. Why bother coding secure? They're not going to get a raise, they're not going to get promoted, and they're also not going to get penalized. If they code a vuln in a site, if somebody finds it, they don't get fired, they don't get fined, they don't lose job prospects, so why bother? They get paid on shipping product. That's the deal. So we're missing incentives, proper alignment, not answers from a technology perspective.
Any developers here in the audience right now? Raise hands.
All right.
Okay. We got a couple. That's good.
I'd be really interested to hear what you guys have to say. Why are you here? Like, why do you care about security? Seriously. In all fairness, really, is this just a personal interest, or your boss made you, or? So it's the organization got religion, and now they say we want to do security to some extent. So for those that can't hear, it's easier to get budgeting to send people to Black Hat and do and learn security and things like that. So yeah, I think, but again, it's just a scale issue. I don't know how many developers are at Black Hat, but there's 5,000 attendees. But if you just look at it at a worldwide scale, there's 17 million developers. I go to Java 1, none of them are interested in security, or very few by comparison.
Yeah. So on the infrastructure side, networking vulnerabilities or operating system vulnerabilities, we seem to be getting a handle on this type of stuff. The tools are working, patching tools are out. Not all vendors are coming out with their patches. Apple came today and patched something that you had found. When was that, month ago, something like that? But
Yeah.
But there is a little bit of movement on the web application side. We don't see that because it's individuals that are developing it, and there's really nobody to go to.
Sure. Well, so speaking from my day job perspective, we find vulnerabilities in websites, vulnerabilities that don't have CVEs, that have to be developed. The customized patches have to be developed internally, and it's a difficult process to actually get those fixed, because it's not a systems engineer that downloads a patch from Microsoft or Apple and patches it. There has to be a negotiation. We have to take a developer off creating a revenue-generating feature that if we don't put out, we will lose money, versus taking this developer time and put it towards fixing a vulnerability, which may or may not get exploited and may or may not lose money. So that's a difficult trade-off with measures that we're challenged to quantify. We don't know how to quantify risk and loss on an unexploited website vuln. Some corporations are risk averse, some are tolerant to risk, and who's to tell them otherwise? You know, in the case of Zynga, who's going to tell them that building a site with SQL injection and it wasn't a good idea when they make hundreds of millions of dollars in profit? Anybody going to really tell them that? you tell them? So, would you switch shoes? Like
So in the cloud, I'm assuming most web applications that get deployed there are web applications, so that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So what's different there? I mean, when we look at infrastructure as a service, you Dan just said, you just spin up instances and you run applications on there. So is there a big difference? Does the cloud make it better or worse?
From a person that's very much a breaker, not a builder, when an application exists in the cloud or somebody's internal infrastructure, it doesn't really matter. Attack the website, SQL injection works across the cloud as not, so does cross-site scripting, CSRF, everything works just fine. For better or for worse, right? But the one thing Hoff mentioned earlier is that the cloud has a way of abstracting the network layers below, and so you can't readily deploy firewalls and intrusion detection systems and web application firewalls in much the same way as you could in other infrastructure, because it's all abstracted away. So when security is added to a cloud-based application, security has to actually be added to the app, because there's no other way to do it. You can't say, I did firewalls and SSL, good to go. No, because how did you do that?
Right. So that sounds to me like immediately it's worse, because I cannot depend on my firewall anymore. I cannot depend on my ADS anymore. I cannot depend on a web application firewall anymore, and maybe some other monitoring that I'm doing there when I'm in the cloud. I have to actually go back and secure the application,
right,
which is what you want. So that's good. I think we agree that that's a good thing. But
well, the incentives have lined up a little bit better.
Yeah.
A little bit better.
So it sounds to me like it's going to be a bit harder in the cloud to deploy web applications, or at least...
Oh, no, they're going to be deployed regardless of security, at least in my experience. From my experience, the greatest feature of the cloud so far is they give the marketing department the ability to circumvent IT. They're going to stand up a new website with a credit card, and that's all there is going to be. That's just what's going to happen. Most organizations that I visit, they have no idea what websites they own. They don't have a single idea. They know a few of the top 10, but when they have 1,000, they have no idea what they own, what they do, what they're worth to them, what they're vulnerable to, nothing. They could all be compromised and they would have any idea. So we don't know our assets yet. And there's going to be...
Reminds me, I was a customer the other day, he said 31,000 minimum web applications, which was like a staggering number to me. I said, I don't know how you could ever...
Give or take.
Well, there might be a couple thousands forgotten still, yeah.
So it's a challenging space. I think we have a lot of the technical answers. We know how to do source code reviews. We know how to do developer training. We know how to do input validation, output filter. We know these things. Can we justify the expense to do so? So that's the thing. Can we justify the expense? Because security does not come free. It does have a cost. And are we willing to accept it? Are we willing to pay it?
Okay, that's going to be the subject. I brought a couple copies here of the white paper for web application security. They are also up on the CSA booth, 105 on the floor. talks about what we need to address. So there's things like the software development process, which if you have a structured process, it shouldn't really be all that different. But there are a couple of aspects that we mentioned already. You don't really have control over the network in an infrastructure as a service setup. So where maybe you should worry about the communication between the servers there, encryption comes to mind, which could be easy point-to-point, or if it's some kind of message bus, could be a little bit more complicated, how you deploy it. Things that you wouldn't do in your internal network. So it forces you to rethink your software development lifecycle. Would you agree with that? Is that something that you see? Do people actually do this? It sounds like you think people just put web applications up there. It doesn't sound like there's a software development lifecycle.
It'd probably be unfair to generalize. Some take it securely, they ask the right questions. Other ones just put in a credit card number and launch the new app. And then there's everybody in between. I don't think it's fair to generalize in industry so far. But yeah, I mean, there's companies that stand up, blogs on TypePad, and that's cool with them.
So outdated software comes into play as well, because they use these older tools to host their network, their sites.
Well, that's the thing. Like, who's managing the patch process there? If you find a new ODay SQL injection in some standard blog software on a hosted environment, it's
screensaver click that.
Oh, okay.
Security, So after 10 minutes of not doing anything.
Who does the patching, how patch? So here's the interesting thing that we find. Custom web application vulnerabilities, you have to custom attack them normally. So you find a vulnerability in one website, you have to custom attack that one particular. But on the hosted environments where everybody's running the same software, you get back into the whole monoculture debate. And now in web applications, you find one bug and down goes 10,000 blogs. GoDaddy had this problem, a whole lot of other blog infrastructures, that overnight you get 10,000 blogs or e-commerce sites that are delivering up malware to their users, and that happens real fast.
Okay, I think we're through to process and tools. So software development lifecycle should be adapted to a cloud deployment. Are you developing in-house and then QAing in-house and developing it and then deploying it in production? Are you doing everything in the cloud? What's happening to the data there? So at least there probably need to be some modifications, or at least a review of the software development lifecycle.
You have to know where you're going to eventually deploy and the threats going into it. If you understand the threats, where you're going to deploy with the threats into those environments, then you can adapt your SDL to mitigate those as best you can.
Okay.
Again, the thing that we learned is we don't have to have a perfect SDL. We don't have to make perfectly secure software. There is a good enough bar out there that we can reach for. It's just, where is the average? Like everybody has vulns. I mean, I'll raise my hand. I blogged about ours, right? We have vulns just like everybody else. How fast do you fix it? How fast can you be on top of it? That's really what it's going to come down to. Tools will help that.
Yeah, so what are the available tools? We have source code analysis maybe, so static analysis?
Depends how you break it down. So you definitely do have dynamic analysis, looking at an application in a runtime environment. You have static analysis, which will include binary analysis and line-by-line code analysis. Mm-hmm. So there's all these different methods to test websites, and they have very good sides, downsides. No one way is obviously the right way. They just very much measure different things.
But you're saying there are working tools right now that people can use,
yes,
and that show them something about it, which is
yes,
black box testing, or if you have the source code, or like you said, there's even tools that look at binary code and give you some insight on that.
Well, just to go through, I guess, some of the pros, if you have binary analysis, if you're working with an application you got from somebody else and they won't show you the code, binary analysis is good. Run that through. If you have the code, you've written it in-house, it's not yet ready for production, doesn't yet run, you can get a deep look at the application. You have the regular static analysis, line-by-line stuff. If the app is already deployed, you want to get a hacker's eye view, what the bad guy will see when they're looking at the website, dynamic analysis is for. So they're not supposed to be a replacement for each other. I know they're supposed to be complementary in the strict sense of the word, but they do measure very different things, and they're just tools.
Okay. That leaves us with more like network tools. Again, web application firewall, something that plenty of companies deploy. Actually, I've read a research paper from you guys a couple months ago that was talking about 40% deployment rate. It's not really that easy in a cloud environment to deploy web application firewalls, except, maybe there might be one of the other cloud provider that includes that or starting to include that. But in the typical scenarios, Amazon, Rackspace, they don't really have these tools right now.
I'm really not up to speed on their WAF deployments on those particular guys, but most of the time I'm exposed to either Mod Security, it's a software-based application firewall that runs on Apache, obviously.